It's the stuff Houston is talking about now. Call 713-212-5950. That's 713-212-5950.
I'm glad I'm going to do this topic today because your kids are getting out of school this week, if they haven't already. They're going to be out for the summer. And as a parent, probably the last thing you want to worry about is what your kids are being taught. After all, the school year is, for all intents and purposes, over. But there may be some things to worry about by the time your kids get back to class in the fall. The Department of Education's proposed priorities for American history and civics education. What is that? Well, it is the preferred way that your child is taught those topics, American history and civics. Now, the way it's written, their proposed priorities would fund, quote, the development of culturally responsive teaching. Culturally responsive teaching. That sounds like maybe code for things like critical race theory. I'm not an expert, though, so let's bring one on. Her name is Peggy Little. She's an attorney at the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Am I reading too much into that, Peggy?
Well, you certainly have identified some of the material that's in the proposed priorities. But I think the central thing to understand about the proposed priorities from the Department of Education is that it has no power whatsoever to set curriculum. This goes back to before there even was a Department of Education. And then in 1979, when it was founded, Congress expressly said that the Department of Education may not set federal curriculum. It then passed another statute that said the same thing. And further, later it passed a third statute that said, and it cannot give grants in aid to schools in which it sets curriculum. So 3 statutes and also an executive order that has not been revoked absolutely forbid the federalism or federal control of state education.
Okay, so if this has no backing, why do it? Is this a way to try to hint, hint, nod, nod? This is the way we would like you to teach these topics?
Well, certainly the Department of Education seems to be responding to some sort of political pressure, but it has no power to do this whatsoever.
Okay. So, again, if you have no power to do it, why even attempt it? What is the purpose behind this type of guidance?
Well, it is to suggest, I think, that the Department of Education, unfortunately, is ignoring statutory constraints on its power. It's probably doing that to satisfy, a political contingent, but it does not have the power to set those priorities at all.
Okay, well, I guess the thing I'm trying to figure out here is we've got the Department of Education setting out some guidance to state boards of education and the school systems. This is what we'd like you to prioritize as far as what you're going to teach. This is what we'd like you to make sure you're including. It's not, I guess, specifically telling them exactly what it is they have to teach, but there are plenty of public school systems, especially in major urban areas, that may already be teaching things like critical race theory, although here in Texas, we are in the process of passing a law that would prevent that from happening. I think that there are probably a lot of parents out there that are wondering, exactly what sort of influence the Department of Education can have over state and local schools, because after all, there's a lot of federal money attached to education these days.
That's true, but Congress passed a statute that said the Department of Education cannot condition grants in aid, which is what it's suggesting here, to be tied to any particular curriculum or programming in the public schools. It simply cannot do that.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are a little. Let me explain to you a little bit about why I am particularly sensitive to this topic right now, and it has to do with history. Here in Texas, I don't know where you are, Peggy, but here in Texas, we have a little something called the Alamo, and we take a lot of pride in the Alamo and what happened there in the fight for Texas independence and how we were our own separate country before we became a part of the United States of America. But there's been a real big push to retell the Alamo story to the point where, and there may be some criticism that's actually has some merit regarding whether or not we've always told the story in a very accurate way. You know, that maybe we've left out some details about why we were fighting so hard for independence. But there's a whole effort to socially engineer the Alamo in a way that is not exactly what you would call a real positive approach. And a lot of Texans are bristling over this because they don't want to have to reimagine their history. But it feels like that's what's going on across the country right now.
I'm sure that does. And this is why local control over curriculum is so important. And the department, you may not be old enough to remember this, but I certainly am. There was no Department of Education when I was young, no federal Department of Education. And it was controversial even when it was started. And one of the absolute requirements when that department was created is that it would not dictate curriculum or programming at all in any of the public schools. That has to be set by state and local officials. And when that is set by state and local officials, concerns such as those you're talking about can be addressed. Parents can go to meetings and say, we think there are these flaws in what the school is teaching. We want to have, several points of view represented. I think it's very important to realize that when the federal government sets priorities for particular programs of studies to be prioritized, that is not only unlawful, but unwise. Because what we want to be doing in our schools is teaching our children how to think, not what to think. And so, in the case of the Alamo, as you point out, there may have been omissions or a better way to teach about the Alamo, but the people who know about it in that local area should be able to go to their local school board, or if it's a state-controlled curriculum, go to the state house and talk about these things and agree upon what might be a broad range of topics to teach on any subject. But that always has to be in the hands of the parents and the local authorities.
Couldn't agree with you more. So I guess the question is, do you think the Department of Education has gone far enough in their quote-unquote suggestion that somebody may have to sue them just to make sure they don't overstep their bounds or try to interfere in an area they have no right to interfere in?
Right. Well, right now they have just published this for comment. And they don't even call it a regulation, which is curious. They should if they're going to make it mandatory, and they haven't. They just call it proposed priorities. So we in the legal business don't quite know what to make of these, but they have asked for comments. I'm sure they're getting many comments. I think it is one of the most commented upon initiatives of the Biden administration. And so we have to see if after all comments are received, whether the Department of Education intends to pursue this course of action. If it does, and if it treats them as if it's regulations, then, amongst the remedies is to have a lawsuit to explore what powers the Department of Education does and does not have.
So they might just be kind of testing the waters right now, see what sort of pushback they might get?
Yeah, it's hard to... I can't read the mind of the Secretary of Education or his advisors or President Biden, but it might be they're just testing the waters to see, what the public reaction is. If they do treat it as a regulation, they're going to have a lot of problems with that because they haven't called it that. And it's very important in law, as in any other profession, you're going to do something, you have to call it by its name.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks for bringing us up to date on it. I know you folks will be keeping an eye on it. Please keep us posted. Appreciate it.
We intend to. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me on.
My pleasure. Attorney Peggy Little, New Civil Liberties Alliance, joining us here on AM 950 KTRH, Jimmy Barrett Show.